Yeah, so my name is Navneet Bali. I'm the founder and CEO of a startup hotel business called LyVinn Hotels. It's a hybrid hotel hostel uh, uh, operation, and it is focused on Europe and on the major cities in Europe. And we've started with one hotel in Frankfurt, which we opened last year, and now we're trying to expand it across to other cities, which we call startup cities. It's aimed at the younger demographic, younger people who want to work, connect, and play. So it's a lifestyle budget focus, if you like, and we are funded with partners who have capital for growing this portfolio and this model and across Europe. So we're focused on growing it across the major cities in Europe. So it's about reward and risk. So in operational real estate, traditional real estate is about taking a lease and not taking operating risk. In operational real estate, investors can then take an operating risk, take a higher reward, but take some more risk in getting involved with the operation, whether it's to a turnover lease or taking a management contract. So they're more involved with the operations of the underlying business. So we are very much focused on it. We are in Europe, which is largely traditional leases. We didn't take operating risk because the institutions who invested in these hotels in real estate in Europe were prohibited from taking operating risk. I think the pandemic has changed that a little bit because people realize that even if you are not taking an operating risk, if there is no business, for example, when you have a pandemic, then you are ultimately involved in the operations and taking a risk. So that means people have become more sensitive to the fact that actually they should get involved and understand the underlying operation well. And that's done well for the hotel industry because people have realized how quickly it's rebounded from the pandemic. And so more and more investors are looking at the underlying assets and seeing if they can take from a risk diversification viewpoint, taking more involvement with the operators through, for example, turnover leases. I think it's not misunderstanding, it's more getting more familiar, if you like, with the different models that are operating. And there are many different asset classes which have come into this scheme. Because before, a landlord would say, I just have a lease and I don't really care what the operation is. But when you start taking an operating risk, then you start trying to understand the dynamics of that particular operation, whether it's a hotel or student housing. You try to understand more about the operation. I think it's more about investors trying to understand now what their underlying performance is, which means they have to take more, the skills. They have to improve their skills of understanding, if you like, and also understanding the operator, and maybe also creating structures by which they align themselves with the operator in a better way. I think we don't know, but my guess is the realization of the pandemic, which is obviously happens only once in 100 years or 80 years, means that people realize now that there is an operating risk underlying whatever investments they make. Apart from that, there is that issue of what the legal structures are. For example, if funds in Germany are not allowed to invest in operating risk, that's not changing immediately. So I don't think it's going to go back, but the trend is towards more operating risk and operational real estate. I think that'll continue. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's to do with the fact that the landlord is now more interested in the operation. So therefore, they're taking a more interest in the operator, not just his financial guarantees that he's providing, but also in his operating performance. And therefore, for example, they will look at much more what the rent cover is, right? And then if they are willing to do some operating real estate risk, they would take some revenue share, if you like. So they're increasing the returns and they're increasing the yields, but it also means taking a little more risk. So higher reward, higher risk. So it's about beds. So whether it's beds in hotels or beds in PBSA or in co-living, and what the different yields are, because one of the things that people find difficulty with, if you like, it's traditional real estate. You can see the yields. What's the lease? There's a covenant. You can value the rental yield and apply a multiple, and you know what the valuation is. When you take operational real estate into account, then you have to start evaluating what the yield might be, because there's an operating risk. There's a higher risk element, and different types of real estate would have different yields. So there's much more of benchmarking. There's more information needed from intermediaries like brokers, and other agencies giving you. So you need more information in order to underwrite and to evaluate the options, if you like. So there's more knowledge required. Well, I haven't had yet, so I hope there'll be some disagreement so we can make a livelier aspect. I think one of the things that we debated already before, I don't think there's much disagreement, but at the same time, there are different views about, for example, some of the questions you asked as to what the yields would be, what the spreads are, where the opportunities might be, and so things like that. So I don't think it's wild disagreement, but there may be different views on where the opportunities are. I mean, for example, I would say there are huge opportunities in the hotel area because it gives you a better yield than some other sectors. But then every sector has its plus points. So, for example, if it's student housing, you do have a less risk, but then you get a lower yield. Before it was OPRE, the sponsors here called it alternative investment strategies. And prior to this, in my previous roles, I've always supported this event through sponsoring it. Before that, I was CEO of a large hotel company. We sponsored the event before it was called OPRE. Now, since it became OPRE, me and my company have always sponsored it and supported Andrew Sangster and his team because we think it's important for the investment market as a whole to understand some of these new types of areas. For example, hostels, hybrid hotels and hostels that LyVinn is all about, as well as PBSA, co-living, all the new emerging markets. And I think the investors have actually caught on. And as somebody said from Aberdeen Investment, up to now his portfolio had 1% in OPRE. Now it's about 10% of the portfolio is in OPRE. So obviously that means events like this have created better understanding of the sector, created more knowledge for investors, given them more comfort, and it's become more institutional as a result.